So I'm going to be taking excerpts from a longer presentation. I'm going to be focusing primarily on my video-based works, except for one sound installation, and you'll understand why that is. And so I've been involved in art and technology for a large number of years. In an earlier life, I was working in electronics engineering. I worked for a company called Northern Telecom, which at the time was the largest telecom company in the world, because they were the first to have 100% digital telephone system. So I started working there when I was 20 years old and designing printed circuit boards. Eventually, I then worked in a department that was designing the computer-aided design software. To explain this particular machine, this is like the heart of a telephone system. If you know what an audio interface is, there's 100,000 audio interfaces in this machine, so you can imagine how large they are. And these machines that were sell for a few $1 million. In the evening, though, I was a painter, and starting in high school, I was copying Van Goghs and copying Picasso. I was very interested in primarily in Expressionism. So after working, I did study electronics engineering. After working 3 years for this company, then I went back to university to get a fine arts degree. But every summer I would work for this particular company. And how can I say, I was a very well-paid art student because I was working in engineering. So this is some of my installations at the time, I guess, I would say traditional contemporary art. This man right here was my manager at Northern Telecom. Eventually I worked in a department full of these mostly European psychologists specializing in perception and cognition, and they would always show up at my exhibitions. And then I decided at that point that I was going to combine my interests in technology and fine art. And then I went to the Center for Advanced Visual Studies at MIT, and one of the first things I did was I created this sort of system of 3 large video projections, and every semester then I made this work, and this was the final one. What was unique about this work from my perspective, there was an interactive component in that the musicians that had played the soundtrack, the video would basically edit itself automatically according to rules. Today they would call it artificial intelligence. That's what it was doing. And this was a sort of well-publicized photo. I'm not going to show you the video of it, but his hands are coming out of hands, his eyeballs, and his mouth. And when I finished that, I started working with a musician named George Lewis. He's a pretty prominent person from New York, really specializing in we could say what would be improvisation. And that piece of software I used was getting more and more advanced. We were doing these performances, sometimes at very prestigious places like the Verona Jazz Festival. But then after a few years of doing that, I was always quite uncomfortable being on stage because I'm not a performance artist. And then I took that technology, and instead of having music control it, it would be human body gestures. And here's the first one called Fit. So when the audience walks into the room, they see a spotlight, they automatically walk to it, and then the video projection of the aerobics instructor starts exercising. And then the audience automatically starts copying her, but the longer you do it, we'll call her the video instructor starts going faster, causing you to go faster, and it just keeps going on and on until it's this ridiculous rate. Because what's happening, I should say I also have a psychology degree, the person psychologically is being controlled by the instructor, but technically that person is controlling the instructor, and they're like, why she's not stopping? So it's like, well, just stop. And so that was the first piece I did of how body gesture was controlling audio and video. And this one, so this is the only sound piece, so instead of, I need to jump back a bit. When I was working the last positions for Northern Telecom with these psychologists, we were exploring this computer-human interface design. So this is where I picked up all of that stuff, was the different ways that humans can communicate with machines. But I wasn't using it for the production of a product, it was for my installation. So this installation called Intersection is a completely dark room, typically about 15 by 12 meters. You hear 4 lanes of car traffic in complete darkness. There's only an exit sign. And as you walk in the room, if you were standing in front of the sound of the car, so it sounds like the cars are moving across the room. There's an 8-channel sound system creating the illusion of 4 lanes of traffic. If you are standing in front of a car while it's approaching, when it gets closer, suddenly it will screech to a halt and it sits there idling in front of you. If you move, then it accelerates across the room. If you remain standing there, then subsequent cars will run into the back of that with a crashing sound. So this installation was made the year that I didn't get, there's an organization in Canada called Canada Council for the Arts that was often providing funding for these works. And I didn't get one that year, so I thought, well, I'll make a sound installation because it was less expensive than a video installation. Ironically, it became my most exhibited piece. It's been experienced by about 800,000 people, so it was so ironic that as a visual artist, a sound installation is my most widely used work. And this was rebuilt, that was made in 1993, controlled by an Amiga computer. And in 2021, I made a new version. It basically sounded the same, except it was with newer technology that's shot with some of the equipment. So here, you don't actually see this. It's in complete darkness. And here, so then a next piece after that was Vox Populi. In this case, the control was through voice. And the particular topic was servitude and leadership. So you walk in the room and this crowd of people are going speech, speech. And then if you want, you can walk over to the lectern and give a speech. And on the computer monitor, these are famous speeches by Martin Luther King, John F. Kennedy, Adolf Hitler, although there's no titles to them. Now the computer is determining your level of confidence. If you're speaking in a competent manner, the crowd yells very supportively. If you're not, then they start booing you. And this became sort of a very popular work also. This one is perhaps my most complicated work technically, and it's about a Schadenfreude, which is a German word meaning the pleasure people get from watching another person suffer. In this case, without realizing it, the audience has the opportunity to be a suicide bomber if they decide to put on this vest. And if they walk in front of this 15-meter projection, they get to navigate through famous buildings. Like this is the Georges Pompidou Centre. This is the street full of art museums. And the ones that I selected are the ones that had never given me an exhibition. This is the Hamburger Bahnhof in Berlin. This is the, that one was actually an exhibition back. Anyway, this is a close-up of the vest. And so the vest really was involved in the tracking mechanism that was emitting infrared light. Now, if you hit this red button, then everything explodes on it. So you're going to see a video. This was done mostly in Berlin, and then in another city called Halle Zela, which provided this very large space for me to work on it. And then, I guess, starting in 2015, then I began doing these architectural projections. This is the first one I did, and this was in Daegu in South Korea. And so now I've hit my 50% points. I'm just going to go through some of these very quickly. This one was in Hong Kong, and what was unique that I was involved with every aspect of it. I wrote the software, I used my own funding to rent these video projectors. These are very, very expensive works to put on because of the cost of these industrial projectors. Okay, so now let's actually go to some video. Oh, of course I knew that. This is the building across the street. So this is the afternoon. We're waiting for the sun to go down. And so this is the This is Danny Libeskind building. If you're familiar with his architecture, he makes crooked buildings. So it sort of distorts the video when you project it. And so these are anyway, you can tell what that is. Okay, this is now. Well, this was, I guess, I would call it an interior architectural projection because the projection was designed to fit precisely to the shape of the wall, which really gave the illusion that you were looking into an aquarium. So this is the same video, except it's significantly larger. This is an architectural projection. This is in Montreal. It's a 105-meter projection. So we'll start here. So you see the person on the bicycle down here. It gives you an idea of the scale of it. Well, the joke I usually make is my work is bigger than my reputation. Unfortunately, it's true. Well, this one actually was up for 4 months and ran for 4 hours a day. And people, they just find it really calming. And fire and water, the reason I'm using that is I'm using something called a substance metaphor, where you have a metaphor that is referring to a certain concept using substances. If you know the work Joseph Beuys, this is what Beuys was doing with fact and felt. It's the same type of idea. In this case, water is a metaphor for birth and rebirth, and fire is a metaphor for death and also rebirth. Skip this one completely. And okay, this is another fire. This is at Ars Electronica. And this one. Okay, this is the first one, which is perhaps the most aggressive one. And so the piece that I'm showing here is basically a modified version of this particular fire. Most of the work I actually shoot, so as someone asked me yesterday, this is not computer-generated fire or computer-generated work. This actually is actual footage of shot with very high-quality cameras. And this one here is, okay, this is a visualization. mud. So no one has ever actually exhibited that one. And I just want to show you this one. Yeah, we need to look at this one. Okay, so this is vested, where you can simulate being a suicide bomber. Has a lot of different systems working. These two spotlights, they track you as you're moving. You saw the green light, and if you're within about 4 meters, then the participant's face is then displayed over top of it as well.
Humans for thousands of years have actually used human tragedy as a form of entertainment, and so the term Roman holiday comes from the poet Byron in reference to the events in the Roman Colosseum.
Yeah, this piece initially was called Roman Holiday, and how Byron used that term is when they would have gladiator events in ancient Rome, it would be called a Roman holiday. It's also a great film by Billy Wilder.
It's a gladiators killing each other.
Yeah. And I guess the last piece we're going to jump to. This took 4 computers to operate. If I did it today, I could probably use less. The room was so big that the video projectors are here, but this was not open to the public. This is basically the room. This is the best studio I've ever had because of the scale of it. So this is basically where the piece was completed.
With sort of the moralistic aspect of it, which is, will this normal person press the button? And basically everybody.
And some people ask, like, well, where'd you get the explosions? Well, a Christmas present one year was the complete James Bond DVD, so I'll leave it to your imagination to figure out what that means. Okay, so here's the intersection.
This installation is a completely dark room, approximately 40 by 50 feet. It's a 8-channel audio installation consisting of 4 pairs of speakers. Each pair of speakers is approximately 40 feet across from each other, facing each other. And what is playing through each pair is the sound of a car approaching and the sound of a car leaving. It's a computer-controlled installation in which each lane is controlled with a random interval. So a car may be coming down one lane, and then you may have no cars coming down other lanes, or you may have 4 cars traveling at one time. This is how the installation works if no one is in it. If someone comes in it, however, this is where the interactivity comes into play. If someone is standing in a lane or in front of a speaker, when a car is approaching, the car will screech to a halt. The system has recognized your presence, and it will then sit there and idle. Once you leave, it will then continue on its way across the room, or technically through the other speaker. And if you remain standing in that lane though for approximately 8 seconds, another car will come and smash into the parked car.
Now, the audience's response to this installation, one type of person finds the installation extremely frightening, and the other type tends to find it very funny. But in general, it tends to provoke this emotional feeling of fear of some type. This really was a real photograph. This is what the guy was doing. So I'm not sure what it means exactly. The new version actually had a wider collection of car sounds, including a Ferrari, a 1929 truck, because initially I was really limited by the amount of digital audio that could be controlled, but by this year I could control 100 hours of it.